The evening that was meant to teach. Life has an uncanny way of revealing truths when you least expect them. For me, this story begins on an unassuming evening, one where I decided to revisit a creation of my own making, a restaurant that I poured my heart and soul into. The restaurant wasn't just a business, it was a dream realized. It stood as a testament to the idea that food could be more than sustenance. It could unite people, create memories, and build community. Every detail of the place, from the carefully curated menu to the warm lighting and comfortable seating, was a reflection of the values I held dear. I wanted every guest to feel welcome, respected, and celebrated. Little did I know, that night, my own values would be tested in ways I could never have imagined. I usually avoided making personal visits to the restaurant. My team was exceptional, and I trusted them to handle the day-to-day operations. But that evening, something drew me there. Perhaps it was intuition, or maybe it was the simple longing to experience the space, not as the owner but as a customer. So, dressed in the simplest clothes, a t-shirt, jeans, and a cap, I walked through the doors and into the vibrant hum of activity. The aroma of freshly prepared dishes wafted through the air, mingling with the faint chatter of diners. The sound was a melody of clinking cutlery and laughter, underscored by the faint hum of background music. Yet, as soon as I stepped inside, a subtle shift in the atmosphere caught my attention. A few employees cast sideways glances my way. Their expressions were fleeting but unmistakable, a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Brushing it off, I made my way to a table at the back, choosing a spot where I could observe without drawing much attention. I wanted to feel the energy of the place and see it through the eyes of an ordinary diner. What I didn't anticipate was the storm brewing in the form of one young waitress. She approached me with a clipped expression, her face betraying irritation even before she spoke. "What do you want?" she asked curtly, not even offering a menu. Taken aback, I responded evenly. "I'll take a look at the menu first, if you don't mind." Her eyes rolled in a gesture dripping with disdain as she plunked the menu onto the table carelessly and walked off. The lack of warmth was jarring, but I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps she was having a bad day, or maybe she was new and overwhelmed. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but the weight of her hostility was hard to ignore. As I scanned the menu, I noticed her in the distance, chatting with another employee. Laughter erupted from their corner, and though I couldn't hear their words, I could feel their gazes darting toward me. My chest tightened. I'd been in this position before, seen but unseen, present but unwelcome. When she returned to take my order, her tone was even sharper, her patience thinner. "Well, have you decided, or are you going to sit there all night?" I smiled politely, determined not to let her sour demeanor affect me. "I'll have the house special, please." Another eye roll. Without a word, she scribbled the order and walked away, leaving a trail of discomfort in her wake. As I waited, the moments stretched, each one laced with an undercurrent of tension. Whispers and muffled giggles continued from her corner, and though no words were directed at me, I could feel their sting. Then the final blow came when she passed by my table, muttering just loud enough for me to hear, "It's always the same. They come in here pretending they belong, but paying the bill is another story." Her words were a dagger, not just for their prejudice, but for the audacity with which they were delivered. My presence, my very being, was a disruption in her neatly boxed worldview. I could have reacted in that moment, confronted her outright, demanded an apology, or revealed who I was, but something stopped me. There was a lesson to be learned here, for her, for those watching, and even for me. I decided to remain calm, letting the evening unfold on its own terms, when the truth takes its time. As the minutes ticked by, the weight of the waitress's behavior pressed heavier against my chest. But I resolved to maintain my calm. Sometimes, I had learned, patience isn't just a virtue, it's a strategy. The restaurant's ambience, so carefully cultivated to feel warm and inviting, now felt strangely suffocating. My table, tucked away near the back, was no longer a sanctuary but a stage. The employees stole glances in my direction, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled amusement. Diners nearby, sensing the tension, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I wasn't just a guest tonight. I had become the focal point of an unspoken drama. When the waitress finally returned with my order, her demeanor hadn't softened. She set the plate down with a thud, the china rattling on the table. "Here, hope it's good," she said, her words dripping with sarcasm. "Thank you," I replied, offering a calm smile. My response seemed to annoy her even more. She huffed and walked away without another word, leaving a trail of cold indifference behind her. I took a moment to breathe. The food was beautifully presented, a reminder of the care and craftsmanship that went into every dish. But the hostility that had accompanied it left a bitter taste in my mouth before I'd even taken a bite. This wasn't just about bad service. It was about something deeper, an unspoken prejudice that had no place in the sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. As I ate, the waitress hovered nearby, cleaning an already spotless table. Her movements were slow, deliberate, as if orchestrated to make me feel unwelcome. Then came the words that made the entire room freeze. "I don't know why certain people insist on coming to places like this," she muttered, her voice low but loud enough to carry. "It's not really their profile, if you know what I mean." Her words were meant to wound, and they did. A few diners exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. The silence that followed was heavy, as though everyone in the room was collectively holding their breath. I looked up at her, my expression neutral but my gaze steady. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She turned to me, startled by my question, her defensiveness flaring instantly. "Yes." "Why?" "It just seems like something's bothering you," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "I'm just doing my job," she replied, her tone sharp. "I don't like it when people try to be something they're not." Her words were a gut punch. They echoed with the weight of countless moments I'd experienced growing up. Moments where I was made to feel as though I didn't belong, as though I had no right to occupy certain spaces. But tonight, I decided things would be different. The meal continued in tense silence. The waitress kept her distance, but I could feel her watching me, her gaze a mix of irritation and curiosity. I took my time, savoring the food despite the bitterness that lingered in the air. When I finished, I called over another server to order dessert. The young man approached nervously, clearly aware of the situation but unsure how to navigate it. "Could I have the house special dessert, please?" I asked, my tone warm to ease his discomfort. He nodded quickly and scurried off. I noticed him speaking with the waitress in hushed tones, her body language a mix of exasperation and disbelief. She shot me a glance, her irritation clear. As I waited, memories flooded back, moments from my childhood when my family was turned away from establishments or treated as though we didn't belong. Those experiences had shaped me, fueled my determination to create spaces where everyone could feel welcome. But tonight, in my own restaurant, those old wounds felt fresh again. When the dessert arrived, I took my time enjoying it, each bite a reminder of the resilience it took to stay seated, to not let her hostility drive me away. Finally, I signaled for the manager. The movement caught the waitress's attention. She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter, her expression smug. She clearly expected me to lodge a complaint, to storm out in indignation. But I had other plans. The manager approached, his demeanor professional but wary. "Good evening, sir. How can I assist you?" he asked, bowing slightly. I gestured for him to sit, and he obliged, his expression curious. "I'd like to provide some feedback about my experience tonight," I began, keeping my tone measured. "Of course," he said, his brow furrowing slightly. I glanced toward the waitress, who was watching from a distance, her arms still crossed. "The food was excellent, and the atmosphere is as inviting as ever," I said. "But there's an issue that needs to be addressed." The room grew quieter. Diners who had been pretending not to listen now leaned in, their curiosity piqued. "The issue," I continued, is with the behavior of one of your employees. Her comments were unacceptable, and her attitude toward a customer was entirely inappropriate. The manager's eyes widened, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. "This is very serious," he said. "May I ask which employee you're referring to?" I turned slightly, my gaze landing on the waitress. Her. The room seemed to hold its breath. The waitress's confidence faltered, her arms dropping to her sides. "He's exaggerating," she said quickly, her voice tinged with panic. I was just doing my job. I met her gaze, my expression calm but unyielding. "Your job is to serve customers with respect, regardless of who they are or where they come from," I said. "And maybe you should think twice about how you treat people, especially when the person you're insulting happens to be the owner of this restaurant." The impact of my words was immediate. Her face drained of color, and the air seemed to crackle with tension. The manager looked stunned, his eyes darting between me and the waitress. The other employees froze in place, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. The waitress opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she stammered. I didn't know." "That's the problem," I said, my voice firm but calm. "You didn't take the time to know. You judged me before you even spoke to me." The weight of reflection. The room was suspended in an almost unbearable silence. Every pair of eyes turned to the waitress, who now stood frozen, her previous confidence unraveling into unease. Her arms, once defiantly crossed, now hung limply by her sides. She shifted uncomfortably under the weight of the moment, glancing at the manager as if hoping for intervention, but he remained silent, clearly processing what had just unfolded. I leaned forward slightly, softening my tone, but my words carried undeniable weight. "It's not about me being the owner of this restaurant," I said, addressing not just her but everyone in the room. "It's about how you treat people. Respect and kindness should never depend on who you think someone is or isn't." Her lips trembled as she tried to respond, but the confidence that had fueled her sarcasm and judgment was nowhere to be found. "I didn't mean to," she began, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "This isn't about excuses," I interrupted gently but firmly. "This is about understanding. Do you realize how your words and actions can impact someone? How they can make a person feel small, unwelcome, or less than human?" She blinked rapidly, her face flushed with embarrassment. The tension in the room seemed to deepen, as if the entire space was collectively holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. A shift in the atmosphere. I turned my attention to the other diners, scanning the room to gauge their reactions. Some nodded subtly, their expressions a mixture of empathy and approval. Others avoided my gaze, clearly uncomfortable but unable to look away. It wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It had become a shared moment, a silent acknowledgement of a lesson that many in the room needed to hear. "I didn't come here tonight to play the role of the owner," I continued, my voice steady. "I came here as a customer, just like anyone else. I wanted to enjoy the atmosphere, the food, and the experience we've worked so hard to create. But what I encountered was far from what this place is supposed to stand for." The manager, who had been listening intently, finally found his voice. "Sir, I can't express how sorry I am," he said, his tone earnest. "This is not who we are, and it's certainly not what we represent. I'll address this immediately." I nodded, appreciating his sincerity, but I wasn't finished. "Addressing it isn't just about discipline or policy," I said, turning back to the waitress. "It's about growth. You have an opportunity here to reflect and change, to understand that every person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity." The waitress looked down, her face a picture of remorse. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I really didn't mean to make you feel that way." I could tell her apology was genuine, but I knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Change requires action, not just intention. A teachable moment. "I accept your apology," I said, "but I want you to do something for me. I want you to think about why you acted the way you did. Was it because of the way I was dressed? Was it because I didn't fit the image of the kind of customer you expected to see here? She looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't know, she admitted. I guess I just made assumptions. And those assumptions, I said, are where prejudice begins. We all have them, whether we realize it or not. The key is to recognize them and challenge them before they turn into actions that hurt others. The room was silent, the weight of the moment settling over everyone. I turned to the manager. This isn't just about one employee, I said. It's about creating a culture where everyone who works here understands that respect and kindness are non-negotiable. That starts with leadership. He nodded quickly, his expression one of determination. You have my word, he said. We'll do better. I'll make sure of it. The power of redemption. The waitress stood awkwardly, as though she wasn't sure whether to stay or leave. I decided to give her a way forward. You made a mistake, I said, but mistakes can be powerful teachers. What matters now is what you do next. Will you let this moment change you? Will you choose to see people for who they are, not who you think they should be? Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. I will, she said, her voice trembling. I promise I will. I gave her a small smile, hoping it conveyed both forgiveness and encouragement. Then this isn't the end of your story, I said. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. As she walked away, her head bowed. I felt a sense of closure. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted again, this time from tension to a quiet reverence. The other diners began to murmur softly, and the clinking of silverware resumed, but the lesson of the evening lingered in the air. The ripple effect. Before leaving, I addressed the room one last time. To everyone here, I said, my voice carrying across the dining area. Thank you for your patience tonight. I know this wasn't the evening you expected, but I hope it's one you'll remember for the right reasons. Every interaction we have with another person is an opportunity to lift them up or tear them down. Choose wisely. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, but growing stronger. I nodded my thanks, then quietly left the restaurant, leaving the evening behind, but taking its lesson with me. That night wasn't just about exposing prejudice or asserting my position as the owner. It was about the power of grace, the importance of patience, and the belief that even in the most uncomfortable moments, growth is possible for everyone. The legacy of one evening. The air outside the restaurant was cool, a welcome contrast to the tension that had filled the room only moments ago. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gazing up at the soft glow of the restaurant sign. The name meant something more to me now than it ever had. A symbol of resilience, community, and the lessons that come from confronting our own assumptions. The evening had left an indelible mark, not just on me, but I hoped, on everyone who had been a part of it. I walked to my car, the city's buzz fading into the background as my thoughts took center stage. A turning point for the restaurant. Over the next few weeks, I made changes. Not punitive ones, but transformative ones. The incident with the waitress had been an eye-opener, not just for her, but for the team as a whole. It was a reminder that even the best intentions can be derailed by unconscious biases and unexamined beliefs. I called a staff meeting, not to reprimand but to reflect. I shared my story, my upbringing, the struggles I had faced, and the vision I had for the restaurant. This place, I said, is more than just a business. It's a haven. It's where people should feel at home, no matter where they come from or what they look like. The waitress, who had been at the center of the incident, was present. Her demeanor was different, quieter, more introspective. I didn't call her out directly. There was no need. The lesson had already been taught, and she was clearly taking it to heart. Together, we created a new set of principles for the restaurant, focusing on empathy, understanding, and respect. Training sessions were implemented, not as a punishment but as a tool for growth. We brought in speakers who shared their own experiences with prejudice and discrimination, sparking conversations that were raw, honest, and necessary. The staff embraced the changes, and I saw something beautiful begin to emerge, a sense of unity, a shared commitment to making the restaurant a place where everyone truly belonged. Growth through redemption. The waitress, her name was Carla, was one of the most surprising transformations. At first, she seemed hesitant, as though unsure how to rebuild her place in the team. But over time, she began to approach her work with a new sense of purpose. One day, several months after the incident, Carla asked to speak with me privately. Her eyes were earnest, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I want to thank you," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "for not giving up on me, for giving me the chance to do better." "You've earned it," I replied, smiling. "Change isn't easy, but you've shown that it's possible." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. That night, I thought I was losing everything. My job, my dignity. But it ended up being the wake-up call I needed. I've learned so much since then, not just about how to treat others, but about myself. I'm sorry for what I said, not just because of who you are, but because it was wrong. I'll never make that mistake again. Her words were genuine, and I felt a swell of pride, not just in her, but in the journey we had taken together. Carla had turned a moment of failure into a catalyst for growth, and in doing so, she had become a leader in her own right. The ripple effect. Word of what had happened that night spread, as stories often do. But rather than focusing on the negativity of the initial incident, people were drawn to the transformation that followed. Customers began sharing their own experiences of feeling unwelcome or judged in other spaces, and the restaurant became a beacon of hope for those seeking a place where they could simply be themselves. One evening, an older man approached me as I was greeting customers. His face was lined with years of wisdom, and his eyes held a quiet intensity. "I heard about what happened here," he said, his voice steady, "and I just want to thank you. Places like this are rare, places where people are seen, really seen. It gives me hope." His words stayed with me, a reminder of the impact that one evening, one conversation, and one decision could have. The restaurant had always been a space for connection, but now it was something more, a place for healing and growth. Reflections on resilience. Looking back, that night could have gone in many directions. I could have reacted with anger, escalating the tension and leaving a trail of resentment in my wake. I could have walked out, letting the waitress's prejudice remain unchallenged. But I chose a different path, a path of patience, understanding, and quiet strength. It wasn't an easy path to take, and it required me to confront my own pain and frustration. But in doing so, I found something more profound, the power of grace. By staying calm and addressing the situation with respect, I had created a moment of transformation, not just for Carla, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The lesson was clear. Kindness and respect aren't just niceties. They're necessities. They're the foundation of every meaningful interaction, the glue that holds communities together. And when we lead with these values, even in the face of hostility, we create the possibility for change. The legacy lives on. Today, the restaurant thrives, not just as a business, but as a symbol of what's possible when we choose to confront prejudice with patience and compassion. Carla is now one of our most dedicated employees, her story serving as an inspiration to new hires. She often shares her experience during training sessions, reminding others of the importance of treating every guest with dignity. And for me, that night remains a touchstone, a reminder that even the most challenging moments can be opportunities for growth. It taught me that leadership isn't just about making decisions, it's about embodying the values you want to see in the world. As I stand in the restaurant today, watching the diverse crowd of diners laughing, talking, and sharing meals, I feel a deep sense of fulfillment. This is what I had always envisioned, a space where everyone is welcome, respected, and valued, a place where kindness reigns and grace has the power to change lives. The path forward. Months turned into years, and the events of that evening faded into the background. But the lessons it left behind were woven into the very fabric of the restaurant. The journey didn't end with a single apology or a new set of principles. It was an ongoing commitment to growth, a continual choice to confront bias and nurture empathy. The restaurant, once a dream I built from the ground up, had evolved into something larger than I ever imagined. It had become a living, breathing entity, shaped not just by the food and ambience, but by the people who worked there, the guests who dined within its walls, and the shared stories that had transformed it into a place of connection and understanding. Carla's transformation. Carla, the waitress at the heart of that pivotal evening, was now a completely different person. She didn't just embrace her role with renewed purpose. She became a cornerstone of the restaurant's culture. Where once there had been judgment, there was now curiosity. Where there had been sharpness, there was now warmth. Her journey from defensiveness to growth was a testament to the power of accountability and self-reflection. One day, Carla approached me with an idea. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady but filled with enthusiasm. "What if we start hosting community nights? A way for people to come together, share their stories, and connect over a meal." I smiled, impressed by her initiative. "What do you have in mind?" "We could invite people from different backgrounds to share their experiences," she explained. "Kind of like storytelling nights, but with food as the centerpiece. It would give people a chance to see the world through someone else's eyes." The idea was brilliant, and it came from a place of genuine passion. Carla wasn't just doing her job anymore. She was actively shaping the restaurant's legacy. Together, we planned the first community night, an evening dedicated to bridging gaps and fostering understanding. Community nights, a new tradition. The first event was a humble affair, with only a handful of attendees. But as word spread, the gatherings grew. People from all walks of life came to share their stories. Immigrants recounting their journeys, locals reflecting on their roots, and individuals opening up about their struggles with identity and acceptance. Each story was accompanied by a dish that held personal significance to the storyteller, turning the evening into a tapestry of flavors and experiences. Laughter and tears flowed freely, and the room buzzed with the kind of energy that only comes from genuine human connection. One evening, a young man stood up to speak. His voice was shaky at first, but as he told his story, the room fell silent. "I grew up in this neighborhood," he began, "but I never felt like I belonged. I was different, and people didn't let me forget it." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But then I came here. I didn't expect much. I was just looking for a meal. But the way I was treated here, like I mattered, like I belonged, it changed something in me. It made me feel seen for the first time in a long time." The applause that followed was thunderous, and as I looked around, I saw tears in more than a few eyes. Moments like these reaffirmed why the restaurant existed. It wasn't just about serving food. It was about nourishing the soul, expanding the mission. The success of the community nights sparked something bigger. The restaurant became a hub for outreach programs, partnering with local organizations to provide meals for those in need and hosting workshops on topics like unconscious bias and cultural awareness. It wasn't just about making the restaurant better. It was about making the community better. Carla became a leader in these efforts, her own story serving as a powerful reminder of how far people can come when given the opportunity. She often spoke at events, sharing her transformation with humility and honesty. "I made mistakes," she would say, "but I've learned that mistakes don't define you. What defines you is how you choose to grow from them." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to confront their own biases and approach the world with more empathy. A global impact. As the restaurant's reputation grew, so did its reach. What began as a local effort to foster understanding blossomed into something much larger. Media outlets began sharing the story of the restaurant and its mission, and invitations to speak at conferences and events poured in. I found myself standing on stages, recounting the events of that evening and the transformation that followed. The lesson I would tell audiences is that no act of prejudice, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is without consequence. But equally, no act of kindness, no moment of grace, is without power. The restaurant's story inspired others to look at their own communities, their own workplaces, and their own hearts. And slowly, ripple by ripple, the message spread that change starts with a single decision to treat others with respect and dignity. The final chapter. Years later, as I stood at the entrance of the restaurant, I watched the bustling activity inside. The tables were filled with laughter and conversation. The staff moved with purpose and care, and the atmosphere was alive with the kind of warmth that can't be manufactured. It was real, born from the shared experiences and lessons that had shaped us all. Carla approached me, a stack of menus in her hands and a wide smile on her face. "Busy night," she said, her eyes sparkling with the kind of joy that comes from doing work that matters. I nodded, returning her smile. The best kind. As she walked away, I took a moment to reflect. The restaurant had become everything I had dreamed it could be, and so much more. It wasn't just a place to eat. It was a place to belong, to learn, and to grow. It was a testament to the power of grace, patience, and the belief that even the most challenging moments can lead to something beautiful. And as I stepped inside, greeted by the warmth of 100 tiny connections unfolding all at once, I knew one thing for certain. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. A vision beyond the walls. The years that followed were filled with milestones that reaffirmed the restaurant's role as more than just a dining establishment. It had become a movement, a beacon of hope, and a testament to the power of intentional change. Yet even as the restaurant thrived, I began to realize that its influence could extend far beyond the walls of a single building. What if the lessons we had learned here could inspire a larger shift? What if our story could ripple outward, reaching communities far removed from our own? These questions kept me awake at night, but they also fueled a fire within me. It was time to take the mission to the next level. The launch of the Kindness Initiative. With the support of the team, we launched what came to be known as the Kindness Initiative. The idea was simple yet ambitious: to create spaces, whether physical, virtual, or metaphorical, where people could connect, share, and grow through understanding. The initiative would provide tools and resources for businesses, schools, and communities to foster empathy, combat prejudice, and celebrate diversity. We began by developing workshops and training modules based on the lessons learned at the restaurant. These programs weren't just about telling people what not to do. They were about teaching people how to see the world through someone else's eyes. From interactive role-playing exercises to open discussions about bias, the workshops quickly gained traction. Carla, once a symbol of what needed to change, became one of the program's most powerful advocates. Her authenticity and willingness to share her own transformation made her a sought-after speaker. I didn't just learn how to treat others better, she would tell audiences. I learned how to look inward and confront my own fears and insecurities. And that changed everything. Scaling the mission. The initiative grew faster than any of us had anticipated. Schools began adopting our programs, businesses reached out for training, and communities requested help in bridging divides. What started as a single restaurant's mission had become a blueprint for fostering empathy on a much larger scale. I remember one particular day vividly. We had been invited to a conference on global diversity and inclusion to share our journey. As I stood backstage, preparing to address a crowd of thousands, I felt a wave of nerves. What if our story didn't resonate? What if it wasn't enough? But as I stepped onto the stage and saw the eager faces in the audience, I was reminded of the simple truth that had driven everything we had done. Stories have power. They connect us, challenge us, and inspire us to be better. And so, I told our story, not just of that night at the restaurant, but of the transformation that followed, of the lessons learned and the lives changed. The response was overwhelming. People approached me afterward, sharing their own experiences with prejudice and kindness, their struggles and hopes. Many left the conference determined to bring what they had learned back to their own communities. The unexpected rewards. One of the most unexpected outcomes of our work was the personal growth it brought to my life. As much as I had hoped to teach others, I found myself constantly learning about people, about resilience, and about the beauty of human connection. One evening, after a particularly long day, Carla knocked on my office door. She held a small envelope in her hand, her expression a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I wanted to show you something," she said, handing me the envelope. Inside was a letter of acceptance to a leadership program focused on community building and social change. "I wouldn't have had the courage to apply if it weren't for you," she said, her voice trembling. "You showed me that I could be more than my mistakes." Her words hit me deeply. Carla's transformation wasn't just about overcoming a single moment of prejudice. It was about embracing her potential and stepping into a role where she could inspire others. Seeing her growth reminded me of why I had started this journey in the first place, to create spaces where people could become their best selves. A global platform. As the initiative continued to grow, we began to partner with organizations around the world. We hosted events in cities across continents, each one bringing together people from diverse backgrounds to share stories, break bread, and forge connections. In one memorable event in Johannesburg, a young woman approached me after a panel discussion. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. "Your story reminded me of something my grandmother used to say," she began. "She always told me that kindness isn't just about being nice. It's about seeing the humanity in someone else, even when it's hard." Her words stayed with me. They encapsulated the heart of what we were trying to achieve. Not just surface-level niceties, but a deeper, more transformative understanding of one another. The ripple effect. The ripple effect of our work was evident in ways big and small. Businesses reported shifts in workplace culture, with employees feeling more valued and respected. Schools shared stories of students standing up for one another and forming friendships across divides. Communities that had been fractured by misunderstanding began to heal, one conversation at a time. But the most rewarding moments were the quieter ones. The emails from people who had attended our workshops, the handwritten notes from children who had learned about kindness in their classrooms, the unexpected thank yous from strangers who had been touched by our story. One such message came from a woman in a small town. She wrote, "I used to think the world was too broken to fix. But your story reminded me that change starts with one person, one action, one moment. Thank you for giving me hope." The legacy we leave. As I reflect on everything that has happened since that fateful evening at the restaurant, I am filled with gratitude. What began as a painful encounter has blossomed into a movement that has touched countless lives. It's a reminder that even our most difficult moments can be the seeds of something extraordinary. The restaurant still stands, a bustling hub of activity and connection. But its impact reaches far beyond its walls, carried by the people who have been touched by its story and inspired to create their own ripples of change. And as I look toward the future, I am reminded of a simple truth. The work is never done. There will always be more stories to tell, more connections to build, and more hearts to open. And that, I think, is the greatest legacy of all, a lesson worth living. As I reflect on everything that has unfolded since that evening, I am reminded of a lesson so profound that it shapes how I see the world. Every moment is an opportunity to grow, to teach, and to lead with kindness. That night at the restaurant wasn't just about exposing prejudice or asserting my authority. It was about embracing the uncomfortable, confronting the unjust, and choosing grace over anger. It taught me that change begins in the smallest of ways. A conversation, a moment of reflection, or a decision to see someone as more than their mistakes. The lessons didn't stop there. They continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways I never anticipated. From Carla's transformation to the community nights, to the kindness initiative reaching corners of the world I may never visit, each step reminded me of the incredible power of human connection. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: kindness is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and sometimes difficult. It means standing firm in the face of hostility, listening when it's easier to dismiss, and choosing to believe in the potential for growth, even in those who seem unlikely to change. We live in a world where it's easy to let cynicism take root, to see only the divisions and the harm. But that night proved something extraordinary. Even the smallest acts of patience and understanding can create a ripple of transformation. What began as a single dinner table interaction became the spark for something much greater, a movement toward empathy, a celebration of diversity, and a commitment to seeing the humanity in every person. As I stand in the restaurant today, the chatter of customers and the hum of activity filling the air, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the people who joined the journey, and for the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. If there's one thing I hope anyone reading or hearing this story takes away, it's this. You have the power to change the world around you, one interaction at a time. Every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, every decision to see beyond assumptions, it all matters. And when you choose kindness, you don't just change someone else's life, you change your own. Final words. The restaurant, the movement, and the people who made it all possible have become a living testament to this truth. In a world that often feels divided, the bridges we build through empathy and understanding are what bring us together. So as you step back into your own life, remember, every day there's an opportunity. Choose to see the good in others, to challenge prejudice, and to lead with compassion. You never know whose life you might change, including your own. And with that, the story ends where it began, at a dinner table, where the simple act of sharing a meal became the beginning of something extraordinary. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.